Hi everybody. Hi everybody. Welcome to another day, another live. Um so my mother is sleeping in the other room, so we are back again. But this time I'm sitting on a different side so you could see my face as well, because yesterday was a bit difficult. It was darker and weird, and I did not figure out the lights, but today I did, and I'm sitting on the other side, so the window is right there. I assume you could see a bit, or you can assume that. And we are back again reading Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, chapter 4. I was thinking maybe we could cover 3 chapters today, but I think that is too much, and I do not have that type of energy in me. I always think in the morning that, okay, today we can cover a bit more, but then by the end of the day, I am so tired that not it's not even the end of the day, it's basically 4 o'clock, and so tired that I just kind of give up on it. So I watched my other video. The audio didn't come on till a minute or so, so I'm not sure how this is going to work. Let me introduce again. We are going to read chapter 4 of Percy Jackson. So if you have the book, you can join me. And if you don't have the book, well, you can just sit and listen to me read, review, and react on the chapter. I've never read Percy Jackson. We are also going to do many popular series that I haven't read, and I have the books finally. I have the entire Twilight series, which I'm excited about after the Percy Jackson series, or maybe hold off the Percy Jackson and start with the first book of Twilight. Haven't figured out because it's way too much in future, and we have barely even started Percy Jackson. So let's get started. Percy Jackson, Chapter 4. My mother teaches me bullfighting. I wish everyone's mother teaches them bullfighting. It is such an important, not characteristic, skill. It's such an important skill to have at any given moment of time. It has been raining for 3 days straight. Today we have no rain. If you hear disturbances, it's because the window is open and there is a lot of noise going on around. It is not raining right now, but it is hella cloudy out there, and the sky is getting darker. So I hope it doesn't get dark by the time we start reading. So let's hold up till I actually try to invite people, because I think it is about time I start inviting everyone else. So it didn't work out. I don't know how to share this. So I guess we need to schedule it to do that. To be not tech savvy and do this. It's okay. I think at least few of you got the notifications. So let's get started. My mother teaches me bullfighting. To review the last chapter, if you haven't read, he goes home, and I think this is very significant of Rick Riordan to put it right in our faces that the color blue plays a very important role in the entire 3rd chapter, and that Sally goes out of the way to keep the blue in their lives as a representative of Percy's father, I think it's lovely of her to do so. And Percy finally finds out that Grover has doesn't have feet. He has hooves. So that's a shocker for all of us. I'm sorry if I don't seem very shocked because I've exposed myself to spoilers so much that I've practically become uh, insensitive about it. We tore through the night along dark country roads. Wind slammed against Calmero. Rain slashed the windshield. I didn't know how my mom could see anything, but she kept her foot on the gas. Every time there was a flash of lightning, I looked at Grover sitting next to me in the back seat, and I wondered if I'd gone insane or he was wearing some kind of shag carpet trousers. But no, the smell was one I remembered from kindergarten field trips to petting zoo. Lanolin, like from wool. The smell of a wet barnyard animal. All I could think to say was, "So, you and my mom know each other?" Grover's eyes fleeted to the rear view mirror through there, though there were no cars behind us. "Not exactly," he said. "I mean, we've never met in person, but she knew I was watching you." Watching me? Keeping tabs on you, making sure you were okay. But I wasn't faking being your friend, he added hastily. "I am your friend." Um, what are you exactly? "That doesn't matter right now." "It doesn't matter. From the waist down, my best friend is a donkey." Grover let out a sharp, throaty blah. It's. Let's try it. Okay. No, no, not my best. My best could be the cats, but goats not my best. I had heard him make that sound before, but I'd always assumed it was a nervous laugh. Now I realized it was more of an irritated bleat. "Goat!" he cried. "What?" "I am a goat from the waist down." "You just said it didn't matter." Blah. There are satyrs who would trample you under hoof for such an insult. Well, wait, satyrs? You mean like Mr. Brunner's myths? Were those old ladies at the fruit stand a myth, Percy? Was Mrs. Dodds a myth? So you admit there was a Mrs. Dodds? Of course. Then why, the less you knew, the fewer monsters you'd attract, Grover said. Like that should be perfectly obvious. We put mist over the human's eyes. We hoped you'd think the kindly once was a hallucination, but it was no good. You started to realize who you are. Who I. Wait a minute. What do you mean? The weird bellowing noise rose up again somewhere behind us, closer than before. Whatever was chasing us was still on our trail. Maybe I should add background music in the after edits after the live when I upload the video to my channel. Maybe I should do that. Also, Twitch has much clearer camera. Just putting it out there. This camera is so blurry and so hazy and makes the live stream looks worse than it is. Maybe I should just record the videos. No, that just takes too much time. And phone memory, which I don't have. Guess we'll stick with the live stream. And yes, the live streams will stay forevermore vertical because believe it or not, like it or not, they are going to stay on the phone. We are phone live stream people. Hmm. Wow, I spoke so much. I think I skipped something. Yeah, I skipped like 2 pages. Oh my god. Whatever was chasing us was still on our trail. Percy, my mom said, there's no too much to explain and not enough time. There's too much to explain and not enough time. We have to get you to safety. Safety from what? Who's after me? Oh, nobody much, Grover said, obviously still miffed by the donkey comment. Just the Lord of the Dead and a few of his blurred thirstiest minions. Grover, sorry, Mrs. Jackson. Could you drive faster, please? I tried to wrap my mind around what was happening. I am too trying to wrap my head around what was happening. This is how high up if I keep the book is visible. Uh, I tried to wrap my mind around what was happening, but I couldn't do it. I knew this wasn't a dream. I had no imagination. I could never dream up something this weird. My mom made a hard left. We swerved into a narrow road, racing past darkened farmhouses and wooded hills, and pick your own strawberries signs on white picket fences. Where are we going? The summer camp I told you about. My mother's voice was tight. She was trying, for my sake, not to be scared. The place your father wanted to send you. The place you didn't want me to go. Please, dear, this is hard enough. Try to understand. You are in danger. Because some old ladies cut yarn. Those weren't old ladies. Those were fates. Do you know what it means? The fact they appeared in front of you? They only do that when someone's about to die. Whoa, you said you. No, I didn't. I said someone. You meant you, as in me. I meant someone, not you. Boys, my mom said. She pulled the wheel hard to the right, and I got a glimpse of a figure she'd swerved to avoid. A dark, fluttering shape now lost behind us in the storm. What was that? We're almost there. Another mile. Please, please, please. My mother ignoring my question. Hold up, I think I need to tie my hair. There, now I'm less annoyed. Okay, where were we? I didn't know where there was, but I found myself leaning forward in the car, anticipating, wanting us to arrive. Outside, nothing but rain and darkness. The kind of empty countryside you get way out on the tip of Long Island. I thought about Mrs. Dodds and moment when she changed into the thing that pointed teeth and leathery wings. My limbs went numb from delayed shock. She really hadn't been human. She'd meant to kill me. Then I thought about Mr. Brunner and the sword he had thrown me. Before I could ask Grover about that, the hair rose on the back of my neck. There was a blinding flash, a jaw-rattling boom, and our car exploded. I remember feeling weightless, like I was being crushed, fried, and hosed down all at the same time. I peeled my forward off the back of the driver's seat and said, Ow. Percy, my mom shouted. I'm okay. I tried to shake off the daze. I wasn't dead. The car hadn't really exploded. We'd swerved into a ditch. Our driver's side doors were wedged in the mud. The roof had cracked open like an eggshell and rain was pouring in. Lightning. That was the only explanation. We'd been blasted right off the road. Next to me in the back seat was a big motionless lump. Grover. He was slumped over, blood trickling from the side of his mouth. I shook his furry hip, thinking, no, even if you are half barnyard animal, you're my best friend and I don't want you to die. I'm going to underline this to call your friend a barnyard animal. It's a great compliment. There are many cute barnyard animals. From now on, I will be calling one of my best friend half rabbit and another of my best friend. I don't think they'll appreciate this. Never mind. Then he groaned, food, and I knew there was hope. Why is Grover just like me? I'm about to die, and the only thing I could think of is food. Yes. I had. Excuse me. I had one near death experience. Like I was choking on water so hard, I almost blacked out. And that was a near death experience for me. And as soon as like the choking was done, all I could think about is, damn, my last meal would have been water and not pizza. So, yes, till my last breath, I would be thinking of my last meal. I think it's very important. We all should think about it. What our last meal would be. Moving on. Percy, my mother said, we have to. Her voice flattered. I looked back. In flash of lightning, through the mud spattered near windshield, I saw a figure lumbering towards us on the shoulder of the road. The sight of it made my skin crawl. It was the dark silhouette of a huge guy, like a football player. It's just I'm holding my breath about this situation that it's hard for me to breathe. Seriously. He seemed to be holding a blanket over his head. His top half was bulky and fuzzy. His upraised arms made it look like he had horns. Who is Percy? My mother said, deadly serious. Get out of the car. My mother threw herself against the driver's side door. It was jammed shut in the mud. I tried mine. Stuck too. I looked up desperately at the hole in the roof. It might have been an exit, but the edges were sizzling and smoking. Climb out the passenger side, my mom told me. Percy, you have to run. Do you see that big tree? What? Another flash of lightning, and through the smoking hole in the roof, I saw the tree she meant. A huge White House Christmas tree sized pine at the crest of the nearest hill. That's the property line. Get over that hill. You'll see a big farmhouse down in the valley. Run and don't look back. Yell for help. Don't stop until you reach the door. Mom, you're coming too. Her face was pale, her eyes as sad as when she looked at the ocean. No, you are coming with me. Help me carry Grover. Food, Grover moaned, a little louder. The man with the blanket on his head kept coming towards us, making his grunting, snorting noises. As he got closer, I realized he couldn't be holding a blanket over his head because his hands, huge, meaty hands, were swinging at his sides. There was no blanket, meaning the bulky, fuzzy mass was too big to be his head, was his head, and points that looked like horns. He doesn't want us. He wants you. Besides, I can't cross the property line. But we don't have time, Percy. Go, please. I got mad. Then, mad at my mother, at Grover the goat, and the thing with horns that was lumbering towards us slowly and deliberately, like a bull. I climbed across Grover and pushed the door open into the rain. We are going together. Come on, Mom. I told you, Mom, I'm not leaving you. Help me with Grover. I didn't wait for her answer. I scrambled outside, dragged Grover from the car. It was surprisingly light, but I couldn't have carried him very far if my mom hadn't come to my aid. Together, we draped Grover's arms around our shoulders and started stumbling uphill through the wet, waist-high grass. Glancing back, I got my first clear look at the monster. He was 7 feet tall. Easy. His arms and legs like something from the cover of Muscle Man magazine. Bulging biceps and triceps and a bunch of other seps all stuffed like baseballs under vein webbed skin. He wore no clothes except underwear. I mean, bright white fruit of the looms, which would have been funny except for the top half of his body. Coarse brown hair started at about his belly button and got thicker as it reached his shoulders. That is a very detailed description, Percy. What were you doing? His neck was a mass muscle, and fur leading up to his enormous head, which had a snout as long as my arm, snotty nostrils with a gleaming brass ring, cruel black eyes, and horns. Enormous black and white horns with points you just couldn't get from an electric sharpener. I recognized the monster all right. He had been in one of the first stories Mr. Brunner told us, but he couldn't be real. I blinked the rain out of my eyes. That's Pasiphae's son, my mother said. I wish I'd known how badly they want to kill you. But he's a don't say his name. Names have power. I love this line. Names have power. It's not just this mythology teaching us that names have powers, but even fairy tales teach that names have powers. And if you want to know why fairy tales, I ask you to refer Rumpelstiltskin, the story of Rumpelstiltskin, where the woman finds out his name. The pine tree was still way too far, 100 meters uphill at least. I glanced behind me again. The bullman hunched over our car, looking in the windows. Or not looking, exactly. More like snuffling, nuzzling. I wasn't sure why he bothered since we were only about 15 meters away. Mommy. Food? Shh, I told him. Mom, what's he doing? Doesn't he see us? His sight and hearing are terrible. He goes by smell, but he'll figure out where we are soon enough. As if on cue, the bullman bellowed in rage. He picked up Gabe's Camaro by the torn roof, the chassis creaking and groaning. He reached the car over his head and threw it down the road. It slammed into the wet asphalt and skidded in a shower of sparks for about half a mile before coming to a stop. The gas tank exploded. Not a scratch, I remembered Gabe saying. Oops. Ah, I would be thinking the same thing. Gabe be like, not a scratch, and the entire car is just gone. Sure. Percy, my mom said, when he sees us, he will charge. Wait until the last second, then jump out of the way. Directly sideways. He can't change direction very well once he's charging. Do you understand? How do you know all this? I've been worried about an attack for a long time. I should have expected this. I was selfish, keeping you near me. Seriously, justice for Sally. That woman just wanted to love Percy, and at what cost? Also, as you can see, the things have gotten darker, and not because it is evening and not because the days are getting shorter, but because it is going to rain once again and the sky has gotten darker. If you don't see me anymore, it's mostly because the sky has gotten darker and my fear of darkness has crept in. If my face and everything looks puffy, mostly because I have chubby cheeks, so you couldn't really tell. But yes, everything is puffy because yesterday I ate Chinese food, which doesn't really suit me, and everything puffs up. Keeping me near you, but another bellow of rage, and the bullman started tromping uphill. He'd smelled us. The pine trees was only a few more meter. The pine tree was only a few more meters, but the hill was getting steeper and slicker, and Grover wasn't getting any lighter. The bullman closed in. Another few seconds and he'd be on top of us. My mother must have been exhausted, but she shouldered Grover. Go, Percy, separate. Remember what I said. I didn't want to split up, but I had the feeling she was right. It was our only chance. I sprinted to the left, turned, and saw the creature bearing down on me. His black eyes glowed with hate. He reeked like rotten meat. He lowered his head and charged, those razor sharp horns aimed straight to my chest. The fear in my stomach made me want to bolt, but that wouldn't work. I could never outrun this thing. So I held my ground at the last moment. I jumped to the side. The bullman stormed past like a freight train, then bellowed with frustration and turned, but not towards me this time. Towards my mother, who was setting Grover down in the grass. We'd reached the crest of the hill. Down the other side, I could see a valley, just as my mother had said, and the lights of a farmhouse glowing yellow through the rain. But that was half a mile away. We'd never make it. The bullman grunted, pawing the ground. He kept eyeing my mother, who was now retreating slowly downhill, back towards the road, trying to lead the monster away from Grover. Run, Percy! I can't go any further. Run! But I just stood there, frozen in fear, as the monster charged her. She tried to sidestep, as she told me to do, but the monster had learned his lesson. His hand shot out and grabbed her by the neck as she tried to get away. He lifted her as she struggled, kicked, and pummeling the air. Mom! She caught my eyes, managed to choke out one last word. Go! Then, with an angry roar, the monster closed its fist around my mother's neck and she dissolved before my eyes, melting into light, a shimmering golden form, as if she were a holographic projection. A blinding flash and she was simply gone. No! Anger replaced my fear. Newfound strength burned in my limbs, the same rush of energy I'd got when Mrs. Todd's grew talons. The bullman bore down on Grover, who lay helpless in the grass. The monster hunched over, snuffling my best friend as if he were about to lift Grover up and make him dissolve too. I couldn't allow that. I stripped off my red rain jacket. Hey! I screamed, waving the jacket, running to one side of the monster. Hey, stupid! Ground beef! I'm so calling someone ground beef. Rawr. The monster turned towards me, shaking his meaty fists. I had an idea, a stupid idea, but better than no idea at all. I put my back to the big pine tree and waved my red jacket in front of the bullman, thinking I'd jump out of the way at the last moment. But it didn't happen like that. Bullman charged too fast, his arms out to grab me whichever way I tried to dodge. Time slowed down. My legs tensed. I couldn't jump sideways, so I leaped straight up, kicking off from the creature's head, using it as a springboard, turning in mid-air and landing on his neck. How did I do that? I didn't have time to figure it out. A millisecond later, the monster's head slammed into the tree and the impact nearly knocked my teeth out. The bullman staggered around, trying to shake me. I locked my arms around his horns to keep from being thrown. Thunder and lightning were still going strong. The rain was in my eyes. The smell of rotten meat burned my nostrils. The monster shook himself around and bucked like a rodeo bull. He should have just backed up into the tree and smashed me flat, but I was starting to realize that this thing had only one gear forward. Meanwhile, Grover started groaning in the grass. I wanted to yell at him to shut up, but the way I was getting tossed around, if I opened my mouth, I'd bite my own tongue off. Food, Grover moaned. Sorry, that was not a moaning. I mean, I didn't moan. Grover did. I'm not good at moaning. The bullman wheeled towards him, pawed the ground again, and got ready to charge. I thought about how he had squeezed the life out of my mother, made her disappear in a flash of light, and rage filled me like high octane fuel. I got both hands around one horn and I pulled backwards with all my might. The monster tensed, gave a surprised grunt, and then snap. The bullman screamed and flung me through the air. I landed flat on my back in the grass. My head smacked against a rock. When I sat up, my vision was blurry, but I had a horn in my hands, a ragged bone weapon the size of a knife. The monster charged. Without thinking, I rolled to one side and came up kneeling. As the monster barreled past, I drove the broken horn straight into his side, right up under his furry rib cage. The bullman roared in agony. He flailed, clawing at his chest, then began to disintegrate. Not like my mother in a flash of golden light, but like crumbling sand, blowing down in chunks by the wind, the same way Mrs. Dodds had burst apart. The monster was gone. Wow, that was a rush. The rain had stopped. The storm still rumbled, but only in the distance. I smelled like livestock, and my knees were shaking. My head felt like it was splitting open. I was weak and scared and trembling with grief. I'd just seen my mother vanish. I wanted to lie down and cry, but there was Grover, needing my help, so I managed to haul him up and staggered down into the valley towards the lights farmhouse. I was crying, calling for my mother, but I held on to Grover. I wasn't going to let him go. The last thing I remember is collapsing on a wooden porch, looking up at a ceiling fan circling above me, moths flying around yellow light, and the stern faces of a familiar looking bearded man and a pretty girl, her blonde hair curled like Cinderella's. They both looked down on me. The girl said, "He's the one. He must be." "Silence, Annabeth," the man said. "He's still conscious. Bring him inside." And that is the end of the fourth chapter. I should underline his description of Annabeth. A pretty girl, her blonde hair curled like Cinderella. So up till now, Percy almost died. His mother dissolved in front of him, and his best friend is limp in his arms. If you were in the situation, if we were in general in the situation, we would probably drop down and start crying. I would, probably. Come to think of it, whenever you think that if you were in the situation, you would do the same, you really don't know. What if you end up crying? What if you are stronger than Percy is shown to be? What if you find another way of killing that monster? We don't know. Should we go for chapter 5? I don't know, seems very exciting. And even though you cannot exactly see my face, but this is a fun, exciting movement. Let's go for chapter 5. You know what? I'm just second guessing myself. Let's go for chapter 5. It is the best thing that has ever happened to us. Chapter 5. I play Pino I play Pinochle with a horse. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation. I had weird dreams, full of barnyard animals. Most of them wanted to kill me. The rest wanted food. I must have woken up several times, but what I heard and saw made no sense, so I just passed out again. I remember lying in a soft bed, being spoon fed something that tasted like buttered popcorn, only it was pudding. The girl with curly blonde hair hovered over me, smirking as she scraped drips off my chin with a spoon. When she saw my eyes open, she asked, "What will happen at the summer solstice?" I managed to croak, "What?" She looked around as if afraid someone would overhear. "What's going on? What was stolen? We've only got a few weeks." "I'm sorry, I don't." Somebody knocked on the door, and the girl quickly filled my mouth with pudding. The next time I woke up, the girl was gone. A husky blonde dude, like a surfer, stood on the corner of the bedroom, keeping watch over me. He had blue eyes, at least a dozen of them, on his cheeks, his forehead, and backs of his hands. Are we going to be introduced to this guy? Because I don't know who this person is. I know that he might be one of the children, but whose child could he be? I'm assuming, but I don't want to say the name out loud. So if you know who they are talking about, then don't forget to mention. When I finally came around for good, there was nothing weird about my surroundings except that they were nicer than I was used to. I was sitting in a deck chair on a huge porch, gazing across a meadow at green hills in the distance. The breeze smelled like strawberries. There was a blanket over my legs, a pillow behind my neck. All that was great, but my mouth felt like a scorpion had been using it for a nest. My tongue was dry and nasty, and every one of my teeth hurt. On the table next to me was a tall drink. It looked like iced apple juice with green straw and paper parasol stuck through a maraschino cherry. I know the cherry, I've heard the pronunciation, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Maraschino cherry. I think that's how you say it. My hand was so weak I almost dropped the glass once I got my fingers around it. "Careful," a familiar voice said. Grover was leaning against the porch railing, looking like he hadn't slept in a week, under the one arm he cradled a shoebox. He was wearing blue jeans, Converse high tops, and a bright orange t shirt that said Camp Half Blood. Just plain old Grover, not the goat boy. So maybe I'd had a nightmare. Maybe my mom was okay. We were still on vacation and we'd stopped here at this big house for some reason, and you saved my life, Grover said. Well, the least I could do. I went back to the hill. I thought you might want this. Reverently, he placed the shoebox in my lap. Inside was a black and white bull's horn, the base jagged from being broken off, the tip splattered with dried blood. It hadn't been a nightmare. The Minotaur. Percy, it isn't a good idea. That's what they call it in the Greek myths, isn't it? The Minotaur, half man, half bull. Grover shifted uncomfortably. You've been out for 2 days. How much do you remember? My mom, is she really? He looked down. I stared across the meadows. There were groves of trees, a winding stream, acres of strawberries spread out under the blue sky. The valley was surrounded by rolling hills, and the tallest one, directly in front of us, was the one with the huge pine tree on top. Even that looked beautiful in the sunlight. My mother was gone. The whole world should be black and cold. Nothing should look beautiful. I'm sorry, Grover sniffled. I'm a failure. I'm the worst skater in the world, he moaned, stomped his foot so hard it came off. I mean, the Converse high top came off. The inside was filled with styrofoam, except for the hoof shaped hole. Oh, sticks, mumbled. Thunder rolled across the clear sky. As he struggled to get his hoof back in the fake foot, I thought, well, that settles it. Grover is a satyr. I was ready to bet that if I shaved his curly brown hair, I'd find tiny horns on his head. But I was too miserable to care that satyrs existed or even minotaurs. All that meant was my mom really had been squeezed into nothingness, dissolved into yellow light. I was alone, an orphan. I would have to live with Smelly Gabe? No, that would never happen. I would live on the streets first. I would pretend I was 17 and join the army. I'd do something. Grover was still sniffling. The poor kid, poor goat, satyr, whatever, looked as if he expected to be hit. I said, it wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. I was supposed to protect you. Did my mother ask you to protect me? No, but that's my job. I'm a keeper. At least I was. But why? Suddenly felt dizzy, my vision swimming. Don't strain yourself. Here. He helped me hold my glass and put the straw in my lips. I recoiled at the taste because I expected apple juice. It wasn't that at all. It was chocolate chip cookies, liquid cookies, and not just any cookies. My mom's homemade blue chocolate chip cookies, buttered with buttery and hot, with chips like still melting. Drinking it, my whole body felt warm and good, full of energy. My grief didn't go away, but I felt as if my mom had just brushed her hand against my cheek, giving me a cookie the way she used to when I was small, and told me everything was going to be okay. Before I knew it, I drained the glass. I stared into it. Sure, I just had a warm drink, but the ice cubes hadn't even melted. Was it good? Grover asked. I nodded. What did it taste like? He sounded so wistful. I felt guilty. Sorry, I should have let you taste. His eyes got wide. No, that's not what I meant. I just wondered. Chocolate chip cookies, I said. My mom's. Homemade. He sighed. And how do you feel? Like I could throw Nancy Bobofit 100 meters. That's good, he said. That's good. I don't think you should risk drinking any more of that stuff. What do you mean? He took the empty glass from me gingerly, as if it were dynamite, and set it back to the table. Come on, Chiron and Mr. D are waiting. Okay, between us, kind of remember the conversation a bit when I read this from the ebook, and let me just say Mr. D was my favorite in that. So we'll see if that still remains. The porch wrapped all the way around the farmhouse. My legs felt wobbly trying to walk that far. Grover offered to carry Minotaur horn, but I held on to it. I'd paid for the souvenir that hard way. I wasn't going to let it go. As we came around the opposite end of the house, I caught my breath. I must have been on the north shore of Long Island because on this side of the house, the valley marched all the way around to Long Island Sound, which glittered about a mile in the distance. Between here and there, I simply couldn't process everything I was seeing. The landscape was The landscape was dotted with buildings that looked like ancient Greek architecture. An open air pavilion, the amphitheater, a circular arena, except that they all looked brand new, their white marble columns sparkling in the sun. In a nearby sandpit, a dozen high school age kids and satyrs played volleyball. Canoes glided across small lake. Kids in bright orange t-shirts like Grover's were chasing each other around a cluster of cabins nestled in the woods. Some shot targets at an archery range, others rode horses down a wooded trail, and unless I was hallucinating, some of their horses had wings. Down at the end of the porch, two men were sat across from each other at the card table. The blonde haired girl who'd spoon fed me popcorn flavored pudding was leaning on the porch rail next to them. The man facing me was small but porky. He had a red nose, big watery eyes, and curly hair so black it was almost purple. He looked like those paintings of baby angels. What do you call them? Hubbubs? No, no. Cherubs. That's it. He looked like a cherub who turned middle aged in a trailer park. He wore a tiger patterned Hawaiian shirt, and he would have fitted right in at one of Gabe's poker parties, except I got this feeling this guy could have outgambled even my stepfather. That's Mr. D, Grover murmured to me. He's the camp director. Be polite. The girl, that's Annabeth Chase. She's just a camper, but she's been here longer than just about anybody. And you already know Chiron. He pointed at the guy whose back was to me. First, I realized he was sitting in the wheelchair. Then I recognized the tweed jacket, the thinning brown hair, and scraggly beard. Mr. Brunner! The Latin teacher turned and smiled at me. His eyes had that mischievous glint they sometimes got in class when he pulled a pop quiz and made all the multiple choice answers B. Ah, good Percy, he said. Now we have four for Pinnacle. He offered me a chair to the right of Mr. D, who looked at me with bloodshot eyes and heaved a great sigh. Oh, I suppose I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half Blood. There, now don't expect me to be glad to see you. Thanks? I scooted a little further away from him because if there was one thing I had learned from living with Gabe, it was how to tell when an adult had been hitting the happy juice. If Mr. D was a stranger to alcohol, I was a satyr. Annabeth, Mr. Brunner called to the blonde girl. She came forward and Mr. Brunner introduced us. This young lady nursed you back to health, Percy. Annabeth, my dear, why don't you go check on Percy's bunk? We'll be putting him in cabin 11 for now. Annabeth said, Sure, Chiron. Chiron. She was probably my age. maybe a couple centimeters taller, and a whole lot more athletic looking. With her deep tan and her curly blonde hair, she was almost exactly what I thought a stereotypical California girl would look, except her eyes ruined the image. They were a startling gray, like storm clouds, pretty but intimidating too, as if she were analyzing the best way to take me down in a fight. She glanced at the minotaur horn in my hand, then back to me. I imagined she was going to say, "You killed a minotaur. Wow, you're so awesome," or something like that. Instead, she said, "You drool in your sleep." When she, that's so cute. When she sprinted off down the lawn, her blonde hair flying behind her. So, I said, anxious to change the subject. You, work here, Mr. Brunner? Not Mr. Brunner, the ex Mr. Brunner said. I'm afraid that was a pseudonym. You may call me Chiron. Okay. Totally confused, I looked at the director. And Mr. D, does that stand for something? Mr. D stopped shuffling the cards. He looked at me like I'd just bletched out loudly. Young man, names are powerful things. You don't just go around using them for no reason. Oh, right, sorry. I must say, Percy, Chiron broke in. I'm glad to see you alive. It's been a long time since I've had a house call to a potential camper. I'd hate to think I wasted my time. House call? My year at Yancey Academy to instruct you. We have satyrs at most schools, of course, keeping a lookout. But Grover alerted me as soon as he met you. He sensed you were something special. So I decided to come upstate, convince the other Latin teacher to take a leave of absence. I tried to remember the beginning of the school year. It seemed like so long ago, but I did have fuzzy memory of there being another Latin teacher my first week at Yancey. Then, without explanation, he had disappeared and Mr. Brunner had taken the class. You came to Yancey just to teach me? Chiron nodded. Honestly, I wasn't sure about you at first. We contacted your mother, let her know we were keeping an eye on you in case you were ready for Camp Half Blood. But you still had so much to learn. Nevertheless, you made it here alive. That's always the first test. Grover, Mr. D said impatiently, are you playing or not? Yes, sir. Grover trembled as he took the fourth chair, though I didn't know why he should be afraid of a pudgy little man in a tiger print Hawaiian shirt. You do know how to play pinochle. Mr. D eyed me suspiciously. I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not, sir, he said. Sir, I repeated. I was liking the camp director less and less. Well, it is, along with gladiator fighting and Pac Man, one of the greatest games ever invented by humans. I would expect all civilized young men to know the rules. I'm sure the boy can learn, Chiron said. Please, I said. What is this place? What am I doing here? Chiron, why would you go to Yancey Academy just to teach me? Mr. D snorted. I asked the same question. The camp director dealt the cards. Grover flinched every time one landed in his pile. Chiron smiled at me sympathetically, the way he used to in Latin class, as if to let me know that no matter what my average was, I was a star student. He expected me to have the right answer. Percy, he said, did your mother tell you nothing? She said, I remember her sad eyes, looking out over the sea. She told me she was afraid to send me here, even though my father had wanted her to. She said that once I was here, I probably couldn't leave. She wanted to keep me close to her. Typical. That's how they usually get killed. Young man, are you bidding or not? What? He explained impatiently how you bid in Pinnacle, and so I did. I'm afraid that there's too much to tell. I'm afraid our usual orientation film won't be sufficient. Orientation film? No, Chiron decided. Well, Percy, you know your friend Grover is a satyr. You know, he pointed to the shoebox horn in the shoebox, that you have killed a minotaur. No small feat either, lad. What you may not know is that great powers are at work in your life. Gods, the forces you call the Greek gods, are very much alive. I stared at the others around the table. I waited for somebody to yell, "Not!" But all I got was Mr. D yelling, "Oh, a royal marriage! Trick! Trick!" He cackled as he tallied up his points. "Mr. D, if you're not going to eat it, could I have your Diet Coke can?" Oh, all right. Grover bit a huge shard out of the empty aluminum can and chewed it mournfully. Wait, I told Chiron. You're telling me there's such thing as God? Well, now, Chiron said. God, capital G, God. That's a different matter altogether. We shan't deal with the metaphysical. Oh, would you look at that? It is raining. Hallelujah. Metaphysical. But you were just talking about, gods, plural, as in great beings that control the forces of nature and human endeavors, the immortal gods of Olympus. That's a smaller matter. Smaller? Yes, quiet. The gods we discussed in Latin class. Zeus, Hera, Apollo. You mean them? And there it was, distant thunder in a cloudless day. Young man, said Mr. D, I would really be less casual about throwing those names around if I were you. But they're stories, they're myths to explain lightning and the season and stuff. They're what people believed before there was science. Science, Mr. D scoffed. And tell me, Perseus Jackson, I flinched when he said my real name, which I never told anybody. What will people think of your science 2,000 years from now? Mr. D continued. They will call it primitive mumbo jumbo. That's what. Oh, I love mortals. They have absolutely no sense of perspective. They think they've come so far. And have they, Chiron? Look at this boy and tell me. I wasn't liking Mr. D much, but there was something about the way he called me mortal, as if he wasn't. It was enough to put a lump in my throat, to suggest why Grover was dutifully minding his cards, chewing his soda can, and keeping his mouth shut. Percy, Chiron said, you may choose to believe or not, but the fact is that immortal means immortal. Can you imagine that for a moment, never dying, never fading, existing just as you are, for all time? I was about to answer off the top of my head that it sounded like a pretty good deal, but the tone of Chiron's voice made me hesitate. You mean whether people believed in you or not, I said. Exactly, Chiron agreed. If you were a god, how would you like to be called a myth, an old story to explain lightning? What if I told you, Perseus Jackson, that someday people would call you a myth, just created to explain how little boys can get over losing their mothers? My heart pounded. He was trying to make me angry for some reason, but I wasn't going to let him. I said, I wouldn't like it, but I don't believe in gods. Oh, you'd better, Mr. D murmured, before one of them in- incinerates you. Grover said, please, sir, he's just lost his mother. He's in shock. A lucky thing, too, D grumbled, playing a card. Bad enough I'm confined to this miserable job, working with boys who don't even believe. He waved his hand, and a goblet appeared on the table, as if the sunlight had bent momentarily and woven the air into glass. The goblet filled itself with red wine. My jaw dropped, but Chiron hardly looked up. Mr. D, your restrictions, he warned. Mr. D looked at the wine and feigned surprise. Dear me! He looked at the sky and yelled. Old habits. Sorry. More thunder. Mr. D waved his hand again, and wine glass changed into fresh can of diet coke. He sighed. He sighed unhappily, popped the top of the soda, and went back to his card game. Chiron winked at me. Mr. D offended his father a while back, took a fancy to a wood nymph who had been declared off limits. A wood nymph, I repeated, still staring at the Diet Coke can like it was from outer space. Yes, Mr. D confessed. Father loves to punish me. The first time, prohibition. Ghastly. I absolutely horrid 10 years. Second time, well, she really was pretty. And I couldn't stay away. The second time, he sent me here. Half Blood Hill. Summer camp for brats like you. Be a better influence, he told me. Work with youths rather than tearing them down. Huh, absolutely unfair. Mr. D sounded like 6 years old, like a pouting little kid. And your father is De Mortalis, Chiron, Mr. D said. I thought you taught this boy the basics. My father is Zeus, of course. I ran through D names from Greek mythology wine, the skin of a tiger, the satyr that all seemed to work here. The way Grover cringed as if Mr. D were his man's master. You're Dionysus, the god of wine. Mr. D rolled his eyes. What do they say these days, Grover? Do the children say, well, duh? Yes, Mr. D. Well then, well, duh, Percy Jackson. Did you think I was Aphrodite, perhaps? You're a god. Yes, child, a god. You. He turned to look at me straight on and saw a kind of purplish fire in his eyes. A hint that his whiny, plump little man was only showing me the tiniest bit of his true nature. I saw visions of grape wines, choking unbelievers to death, drunken warriors insane with battle lust, sailors screaming as their hands turned into flippers, their faces elongating into dolphin snouts. I knew that if I pushed Mr. D, he would show me worse things. He would plant a disease in my brain and would leave me wearing a straitjacket in a rubber room for the rest of my life. Would you like to test me, child? No, no, sir. The fire died a little. He turned back to his card game. I believe I win. Not quite, Mr. D. He set down a straight, tallied the points, and said, the game goes to me. I thought Mr. D was going to vaporize Chiron right out of his wheelchair, but he just sighed through his nose as if he were used to being beaten by the Latin teacher. He got up and Grover rose too. I'm tired. I believe I'll take a nap before the sing along tonight. But first, Grover, we need to talk again about your less than perfect performance on this assignment. Grover's face beaded with sweat. Yes, sir. Mr. D turned to me. Cabin 11, Percy Jackson, and mind your manners. He swept into the farmhouse, Grover following miserably. Will Grover be okay? I asked Chiron. Chiron nodded, though he looked a bit troubled. Old Dionysus isn't really mad. He just hates his job. He's been grounded, I guess you would say, and he can't understand waiting another century before he's allowed to go back to Olympus. Mount Olympus. You're telling me there really is a palace there? Well, now, there's Mount Olympus in Greece, and then there's the home of gods, the convergence point of their powers, which did indeed used to be on Mount Olympus. It's still called Mount Olympus out of respect to the old ways, but palace moves, Percy, just as the gods do. You mean the Greek gods are here, like in America? Well, certainly, gods move with the heart of the West. The what? Come, Percy. What do you call Western civilization? Do you think it's just an abstract concept? No, it's a living force, a collective consciousness that has burned bright for thousands of years. The gods were part of it. You might even say they are the source of it, or at least they are tied so tightly to it that they couldn't possibly fade, not unless all the Western civilization were obliterated. The fire started in Greece, then, as you well know, or as I hope you know, since you passed my course, the heart of fire moved to Rome, and so did the gods. Oh, different names, perhaps Jupiter for Zeus, Venus for Aphrodite, and so on, but the same forces and the same gods. And then they died. Died? No! Did the West die? The gods simply moved to Germany, to France, to Spain for a while. Wherever the flame was brightest, the gods were there. They spent several centuries in England. All you need to do is look at the architecture. People do not forget the gods. Every place they've ruled, or the last 3,000 years, you can see them in paintings, in statues, on the most important buildings. And yes, Percy, of course they are now in your United States. Look at your symbols. The eagle for Zeus, look at the statue of Prometheus in Rockefeller Center, the Greek facades of your government buildings in Washington. I defy you to find an American city where the Olympians are not prominently displayed in multiple places. Like it or not, and believe me, plenty of people weren't even fond of Rome either. America is now the heart of the flame. It is the great power of the West, and so Olympus is here, and we are here. It was all too much, especially the fact that I seemed to be included in Chiron's we, as if I were the part of some club. Who are you, Chiron? Who am I? Chiron smiled. He shifted his weight as if he were going to get out of his wheelchair, but I knew that was impossible. He was paralyzed from waist down. Who are you? Well, that's the question we all want answered, isn't it? But for now, we should get you a bunk in cabin 11. There will be new friends to meet, and plenty of for lessons tomorrow. Besides, there will be toasted marshmallows at the campfire tonight, and I simply adore them. And then he did rise from his wheelchair, but there was something odd about the way he did it. His blanket fell from the legs, and the legs didn't move. His waist kept getting longer, rising from his belt. At first, I thought he was wearing very long white velvet underwear, but as he kept rising out of the chair, taller than any man, I realized that the velvet white underwear wasn't underwear, it was the front of an animal muscle and sinew under coarse white fur. And the wheelchair wasn't a chair. It was some kind of container, an enormous box on wheels, and it must have been magic because there's no way it could have held all of him. A leg came out and a leg came out, long and knobby kneed, with a huge polished hoof. Then another front leg, then hindquarters, and then the box was empty, nothing but a metal shell, with a couple of fake human legs attached. I stared at the horse who had just sprung from the wheelchair, a huge white stallion, with but where its neck should be, there was the huge upper body of my Latin teacher, smoothly grafted to the horse's trunk. What a relief, the centaur said. I'd been cooped up in there so long my fetlocks had fallen asleep. Now, come, Percy Jackson, let's meet the other campers. Wow. That was the end of the fifth chapter, and I cannot believe it. I made it. 2 chapters in a day. Fantastic. It was a fantastic overview and a fantastic explanation of everything that was going on in Percy's life. I'm liking this book more and more, and I just cannot wait for them to go on this adventure where Percy is told that he is the lightning thief and he has to prove his innocence. And also, because I saw Percy Jackson the movie so many times, because for my love of Logan Lerman and Alexandra Daddario, I have kind of a basic idea of what to expect. So I cannot wait for all of the scenes that were there to read. I guess that's it for today's live stream. I had extreme fun and I hope you did too. You can rewatch this when it will be uploaded to YouTube. Have fun. Bye.